Trump just accidentally told you the truth about this entire war. He said Iran does not have to make a deal for him to end it, which means every deadline, every 15-point proposal, every extension, every talk of productive negotiations was never really about getting Iran to agree to anything. It was about buying time for something else entirely. For 5 weeks, the American public was told this war had a diplomatic endgame. Iran was begging for a deal. Talks were going very well. 15 points of agreement were on the table. April 6th was the deadline. And then on Tuesday afternoon, Donald Trump walked out in front of reporters at the White House and said the following words out loud. Iran doesn't have to make a deal, no. And then he said within maybe 2 weeks, maybe a couple of days longer to do the job, we'll be finished. And then he said something that should stop every person watching this cold. He said, when we feel that they are, for a long period of time, put into the Stone Ages, and they won't be able to come up with a nuclear weapon, then we'll leave. Put into the Stone Ages. That is not the language of a government conducting diplomacy. That is the language of a government describing the complete and permanent destruction of an adversary's industrial and military capacity. And Iran's Foreign Minister Araghchi heard every word of it. And he went on Al Jazeera and said the trust level between the two nations is at zero, not low. Not damaged, zero. And then he said something that reveals exactly what Iran thinks is happening right now. He said one time years ago we negotiated and we even got a deal, and then the U.S. withdrew without any explanation. And twice last year and now this year we negotiated with the U.S. and the result was an attack by them. Iran is not describing a trust problem. Iran is describing a pattern. Negotiate, get bombed, negotiate again. Get bombed again. Zero trust is not a negotiating position. It is a historical verdict. Let us be precise about exactly what Trump said on Tuesday, because the specific language he used in multiple separate statements across that one day tells you everything about what the American war aims actually are and why the diplomatic track was never what it appeared to be. He told reporters Iran doesn't have to make a deal. He said, we'll be finished in 2 weeks, maybe a couple of days longer to do the job. He said, we want to knock out every single thing they have. He said, when Iran is put into the Stone Ages and they won't be able to come up with a nuclear weapon for a long period of time, we'll leave. And then in a separate statement, he said, whether we have a deal or not, it's irrelevant. Read those words together, and what you have is a president describing a military campaign that has a completion condition, the permanent destruction of Iran's military and nuclear capacity, that is entirely independent of whether Iran agrees to anything. The deal that Trump has been publicly pursuing for 5 weeks is irrelevant in his own words. What matters is knocking out every single thing they have, putting them in the Stone Ages, and then leaving. That is not a ceasefire framework. That is a bombing campaign with an exit timeline. And Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth confirmed it from the Pentagon podium in a phrase that should be quoted in every history book written about this war. He said, we will negotiate with bombs. I didn't mean it flippantly when I said that. In the meantime, we'll negotiate with bombs. The Secretary of Defense of the United States said out loud on camera that the method of negotiation with Iran is bombs, not envoys, not letters, not 15-point proposals. Bombs. And somewhere in Tehran, Araghchi gave an interview to Al Jazeera and said zero trust. And the world is somehow supposed to treat these two things as part of the same diplomatic process. Here is the history that Araghchi cited when he explained why trust is at zero and why it matters more than any current diplomatic signal from Washington. In 2015, Iran negotiated the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, with the Obama administration and 5 other world powers. Iran agreed to dramatic restrictions on its nuclear program. Iran implemented those restrictions. The IAEA verified compliance. And then in 2018, Donald Trump withdrew the United States from the agreement without Iran having violated a single term. Iran got a deal and the U.S. abandoned it. That is the first data point Araghchi referenced. Then in 2025, Iran and the U.S. conducted multiple rounds of indirect nuclear negotiations in Oman, Rome, and Muscat. Araghchi himself was the Iranian negotiator. He has described those talks as making real progress. The 4th round was scheduled to take place in Vienna. The date of that Vienna meeting was never reached because on June 13, 2025, before the scheduled Vienna session, Israel attacked Iran in what became the 12-day war. Iran got into serious negotiations, and the U.S. allowed its ally to bomb them before the next round of talks. That is the second data point. And now in February 2026, Iran and the U.S. were in direct nuclear negotiations in Oman on February 6th. Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi said a historic agreement was within reach on February 25th. He emphasized that diplomacy must be prioritized to avoid further escalation. 3 days later, on February 28th, the United States launched Operation Epic Fury. Iran got into serious negotiations, and the result was a war. That is the third data point. 3 times Iran has engaged in serious negotiations with the United States. 3 times the result has been American military action. When Araghchi says the trust level is at 0, he is not describing a feeling. He is describing 3 historical facts that led to the same conclusion every single time. Now let us examine what Defense Secretary Hegseth's statement that Iran's defense industrial base is nearly completely destroyed actually means in the context of Trump's no-deal needed announcement. If Iran's military capacity has truly been devastated, and Hegseth claimed that Iran's missile and drone programs are being overwhelmingly destroyed, that U.S. warplanes now fly freely over Iranian airspace striking mobile missile and drone launchers as they appear, and that Iran's ability to project power beyond its borders has been dramatically degraded, then what is the diplomatic track actually for? If the military objective is already nearly complete, if Iran is nearly in the Stone Age as Hegseth described, if there are very few military targets left on the target list, then the question of whether Iran signs a deal or not becomes genuinely irrelevant to the operational outcome. Trump said exactly that. The deal is irrelevant. We'll be leaving in 2 weeks regardless. What Hegseth and Trump are describing is a military campaign that has achieved its core objectives and is now in the final phase of completion, after which the United States intends to declare the mission accomplished and leave. Whether Iran opens Hormuz, whether Iran agrees to the 15 points, whether Iran signs anything, none of it changes the American exit timeline. 2 weeks, maybe a couple of days longer, then we leave. And Iran will be in the Stone Ages in terms of its nuclear and military capacity for years. That is the plan as Trump described it on Tuesday. And every analyst watching this war from the beginning who has been noting the contradiction between Trump's diplomatic claims and the Pentagon's military posture is now watching that contradiction resolve. Not through a deal, but through a unilateral American decision to declare the job done and go home. But here is the problem with that plan that neither Trump nor Hegseth addressed on Tuesday, and that Iran's foreign minister identified precisely in his Al Jazeera interview. Araghchi said, "It is not as easy for Trump to just walk out of a conflict that has spread across the region and killed thousands of people." He noted a foreign policy expert's observation that 3 weeks ago, Trump said the war would end in 4 days, then he said 3 weeks, then he extended to April 6th, and now he says 2 to 3 more weeks. The timeline just keeps extending, because at the end of the day, the United States is no longer in control of this war. That last sentence is the most important thing anyone has said about this war in 5 weeks. The United States is no longer in control of this war. Consider what that means. Even if Trump declares the job done and announces the U.S. is leaving in 2 weeks, the following things will still be happening. Iran will still have Hormuz effectively closed. Every tanker captain will still be looking at a $160 Brent crude price and war risk insurance premiums that make transit commercially unviable even without active Iranian targeting. The Houthis are still in the war and still threatening Bab al-Mandab. Iran can still fire missiles at Israel and Gulf states from its remaining capacity, even after everything Hegseth described as destroyed. Hezbollah is still active in Lebanon. Iranian-backed militias in Iraq are still attacking American bases. The kidnapping of American journalist Shelley Kittleson in Baghdad on Tuesday by a militia linked to Iran-aligned Kataib Hezbollah is a direct demonstration that Iran's influence and its proxy's operational capability did not end because Trump said it would be over in 2 weeks. You cannot bomb your way to a conclusion that requires the cooperation of an adversary that has publicly told you it is waiting for you with strength prepared and that the trust level is 0. The IRGC's threat to target 17 American technology companies across the Middle East on April 1st is the clearest possible demonstration of the point Araghchi was making about the United States not being in control of this war. The list is worth reading because every single company on it is a company that Americans interact with every day. Cisco, HP, Intel, Oracle, Microsoft, Apple, Google, Meta, IBM, Dell, Palantir, NVIDIA, JP Morgan Chase, Tesla, General Electric, Boeing. The company that builds the B-52 bombers that the U.S. Joint Chiefs Chairman Dan Kane confirmed are now flying over Iran for the first time in this war is on Iran's target list. Boeing. The United States is bombing Iran with Boeing aircraft. Iran is threatening to bomb Boeing's regional facilities in response. The company that makes the F-35 stealth fighters on the USS Tripoli's deck is Boeing. The company that made the bunker buster bombs that hit Isfahan's ammunition depot overnight on Tuesday involves Boeing-related defense contracts. You cannot separate the American military campaign from American corporate infrastructure in the Gulf in 2026. The Gulf is the center of global AI investment. The UAE and Saudi Arabia have attracted billions of dollars of American tech investment specifically because the region has been positioned as a safe, stable partner in the AI race against China. Every Amazon data center, every Microsoft cloud facility, every Google regional hub in the Gulf is now a listed IRGC target. And the State Department on Tuesday advised all Americans in Saudi Arabia to shelter in place due to threats against U.S. citizens. Shelter in place. In a country that hosts American military bases and has been an American ally for 7 decades. That is the real-world consequence of a war that Trump says is almost over. The Wall Street Journal reported on Tuesday that Trump told White House staff he would be open to ending the war even without reopening the Strait of Hormuz. That single leak explains more about the current moment than any official statement. If Trump is genuinely prepared to leave with Hormuz still closed, then everything he has said for 5 weeks about the strait being a red line, about April 6th being the deadline, about obliterating power plants and oil wells, and Karg Island if Hormuz does not open immediately, all of it was either a negotiating tactic that failed or a set of statements that Trump himself no longer believes he needs to honor. The stock market rallied 4 to 6% across Asian markets on Wednesday morning after the Journal reported this possible exit. Markets are pricing in the possibility that this war ends quickly, with Trump declaring victory, Hormuz still closed, oil prices still elevated, and Iran's military capacity degraded, but the Islamic Republic still standing. That is a very different outcome from regime change, unconditional Iranian surrender, permanent Hormuz reopening, and a signed nuclear deal. It is the outcome that the analysts who have been most skeptical about Trump's stated war aims have been predicting for weeks. A messy, incomplete exit dressed up as mission accomplished while the underlying conditions that caused the war, Iranian nuclear ambitions, IRGC proxy network, Hormuz leverage, remain largely in place. Iran's FM Araghchi told the Qatar-based broadcaster Al Jazeera that Iran does not want a ceasefire because it would lead to a vicious cycle of repeated war. He said Iran wants the war to end in a way that it does not repeat on Iran's own terms. He listed Iran's conditions: end to all aggression, concrete guarantees against recurrence, war damage reparations, comprehensive end to all fronts, including all resistance groups, recognition of Iranian sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz. Those 5 conditions have not changed since Iran first stated them. Trump's no-deal needed announcement does not change those 5 conditions. Iran's zero-trust statement does not change those 5 conditions. Iran's threat to target American tech companies does not change those 5 conditions. What changes is whether those conditions are ever the subject of a serious negotiation. And with the trust level at 0, with the pattern of 3 negotiations followed by 3 military attacks fully established in Tehran's institutional memory, the prospect of a serious negotiation producing a lasting settlement that prevents the next round of this cycle appears to be precisely as likely as the trust level Araghchi described. 0. Trump will address the nation on Wednesday night to provide what the White House called an important update on Iran. That address will be the first time Trump has spoken to the American people directly about this war in a formal national address since the war began. The last time he made a formal statement about Iran was the 8-minute video posted on Truth Social in the hours after the February 28th strikes began. What he says on Wednesday night, whether he frames this as mission approaching completion, whether he declares specific military achievements and sets conditions for withdrawal, whether he directly addresses the $4 gas price and the American families paying it, will determine whether the financial markets continue their rally or give back those gains when the reality of a still closed Hormuz and a still threatening Iran reasserts itself. The Quincy Institute analyst Trita Parsi, who said the timeline keeps extending because America is no longer in control of this war, will be watching that speech with the same question every analyst watching this conflict is asking. Does Trump actually have an exit, or is this the fifth version of a deadline that becomes the sixth version 2 weeks from now? This channel has tracked every statement, every deadline, every military movement, and every diplomatic claim of this war from day one. The community here has been ahead of the mainstream analysis at every major turn. Drop a comment right now and tell us what you think Trump says in his address tonight. Does he declare mission accomplished? Does he announce the ground operation? Does he extend again? Because what happens Wednesday night sets the trajectory for everything that comes next in this war. And the people following this story have been right about the big calls more than anyone on cable news.